Buddy, back a while ago, and I can't even remember the year, I found out about this molecule called nitric oxide. And the reason that it was so interesting to me, believe it or not, is that I knew it was absolutely necessary for vasodilatation, meaning the dilation of blood vessels in the body. And the blood vessels go all over. There's a tiny capillary network, which we will show you later tonight. And I wrote a book called The Secret Pleasures of Menopause, which was actually a monograph about nitric oxide and how if you followed a nitric oxide boosting lifestyle, you would enjoy better health in all ways. The other thing was this: the final common pathway for the way that erectile dysfunction drugs work is nitric oxide. In other words, you've got to get the blood where you want it and not where you don't want it. And so the nitric oxide pathway was very important there. I also knew that nitric oxide was used as a gas for premature babies. And believe it or not, the lungs are erectile tissue, and that has to do with nitric oxide levels. And all the time, whenever I would write about this, I would talk about the times in your life when nitric oxide was naturally boosted, and that was aerobic exercise. The fertilization of an egg with a sperm is a big burst of nitric oxide. It would appear that the near-death experience where you see the light is a big burst of nitric oxide. And also, meditation and orgasm, all those things are a big burst of nitric oxide. So people would say to me, well, can I take it in a pill? And no, it is an odorless, colorless gas, and it's evanescent, meaning that it's produced by the endothelial lining of every cell in your body. That's one cell thick, very, very tiny. And if you have a healthy endothelium, it knows how to produce nitric oxide. But I also knew, once I heard about Cardio Miracle and I heard the studies, indeed, this particular supplement does something to support the body's nitric oxide system. The other thing is this: nitric oxide is the Uber neurotransmitter, and high levels of nitric oxide automatically boost your levels of serotonin, dopamine, beta endorphin, all of the feel-good chemicals for which people often take psych meds. And I'm always one to work as upstream as possible. Like if we could give somebody a supplement that automatically ironed in the healthy nitric oxide pathways, then we would be preventing all kinds of illness that are associated with lack of optimal circulation, lack of optimal brain hormones, and so on. And when I met John and he taught me about their product, Cardio Miracle, and it was in the very beginning stages of the production of this stuff, then I began to use it with some of my friends. Like my favorite story is a master's swimmer. So this is a guy who is so healthy that when he gets on a treadmill, they don't even have algorithms for how fit he is. But in the pool, he was having problems with some sort of heart things. It wasn't atrial fibrillation. It wasn't the usual stuff. And I said to him, I want you to try this stuff. And he wouldn't miss a day now. He does add, he adds some fish oil and some L-carnitine just for fun. I sometimes add my homemade hydroxychloroquine, the grapefruit and the lemon peel stuff that's really good as a zinc ionophore. And that does not taste good. But if you put it in Cardio Miracle, same with iodine, then you never taste a thing. It is like the best base for anything that you want to take and not want to taste. It's delicious. And so John, I believe, has done a real service to humanity with this particular supplement. So John, over to you. So the two of us, I'm working on nitric oxide as the molecule of health, and you're over there with cardiac problems trying to figure it out. And then the way it always works is God brings together the people who are supposed to come together. And this has been happening more than in my whole life from 2020 till now. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Northrup, we can't tell you, and this is my lovely wife, Janet, who you've met on a number of occasions, and we still reflect on our first meeting in a lovely restaurant in Maine, near your office and your home, and having the privilege of being able to share with truly one of the experts on nitric oxide in the whole world. It's so wonderful to talk to somebody who knows so much about it, because I've spent 14 lonely years trying to educate doctors and scientists and nutritionists on nitric oxide. And fortunately, it's getting a little bit easier, because after 23 years after the Nobel Prize was awarded for nitric oxide and its impact on heart disease, the world is waking up to it finally and hearing a little bit more about it. And of course, with this crazy pandemic, whatever we want to call it, it's refocused a lot of energy on nitric oxide, because all of the vascular problems, the cardiovascular issues, the spike protein damage, those types of things are all now coming out with all kinds of research that arginine, amino acids, and nitric oxide has an impact on that as well. But I just couldn't be more delighted to be a part of the wonderful world of Dr. Northrup, and Janet and I have just so enjoyed having a relationship, using your wonderful cosmetics, and also to have you join our crusade in helping to save the world from a lack of nitric oxide, because just like with vitamin D3, most people as they get past 30 years old become deficient in this life-changing gas. And Case Western University even said a few years ago that nitric oxide was the third essential gas with oxygen and carbon dioxide for bodily function and mitochondrial health. So we know how important it is. You knew about it far sooner than most people and wrote about it, and how nice it was when you recognized our multiple ways of stimulating nitric oxide and extending it to be therapeutically valuable for people. You instantly saw that science as connecting the dots in something that you felt that there was a dearth in the marketplace, and have been willing to try and do the due diligence on our product. And now we have some of the top experts in the entire world that are all coming along later than Dr. Northrup, because you recognized it quickly, on seeing the benefits that this wonderful supplement that God has given us, and the world now can understand the benefits of nitric oxide. So we're just delighted to be here tonight and share some of our insights and experience along with yours to these listeners of yours.
Well, and also we are at a time when there's a huge paradigm shift that's happening. It's kind of tumultuous, but it really goes back to Louis Pasteur and Antoine Beauchamp. And Pasteur was all about, it's the germ, it's the germ, it's the germ. And Beauchamp, his rival, was saying, no, it's the terrain. Because when the terrain is healthy, that is all of the environment around a particular germ, then no pathogen can get a foothold. And that is very much what we also have seen with this current disease du jour that has locked down the planet. And it was those with the pre-existing conditions, those with the lowest vitamin D. I remember Dr. Ryan Cole coming out early on and just saying, if everyone had a high enough vitamin D level, they would not be susceptible. And one of the things that's most interesting to me is in Cardio Miracle, it's not like there's this huge high level of vitamin D, like 10,000 international units per day. But again, we're back to the terrain. When everything is working synergistically, then you get a much better result with a much lower dose. Can you speak to that, like how you did the formulation and how you knew that the product is only as good as the quality of the ingredients? And I knew this from years ago with pharmaceutical grade supplements. And those are supplements that use pharmaceutical grade ingredients as opposed to food grade. Food grade is for a pizza. Pharmaceutical grade just means this would pass muster with quality, and what you say is on the label is actually in the supplement. This is a huge deal. It's way different than just sticking some stuff in a bottle. Do you want to speak to how it's manufactured, where you get the ingredients, why it's different?
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And first, one little thing that I always try to include the nitric oxide delivery and stimulation and the extension of that nitric oxide with the vitamin D3, because they're kind of the 1-2 punch of the cardiovascular system, and also, in my opinion, the antioxidant power, both as a preventative towards abnormal cell replication. We know what that is all about, tumors, et cetera. But also the vitamin D and the nitric oxide is, in my opinion, the greatest key to build your immune system so your body can heal itself. So it's all about providing the energy, the tools, the facility, the ingredients to stimulate and help the body and the immune system be at its very best. And you mentioned the vitamin D, for example. They've talked about that if your vitamin D is at 50 or above, then you've got a really good chance of having a strong enough immune system to fight off whatever pathogens, variants, whatever's going on out there. And yet 80% of the population is deficient in D, including even people who live in Hawaii. I mean, Polynesians, Native Americans, African Americans, all are almost as ethnic groups low in D genetically, or have a difficult time absorbing and keeping it in the blood serum level. And same thing applies with nitric oxide. And so we've seen the majority of the deaths or mortality from the last 2 years be in the 70 and older group of those 3 ethnic groups, the Native Americans, African Americans, and Polynesians, because of these deficiencies. We ended up settling upon 1,500 international units per serving twice a day, so 3,000. But I had a hunch from talking to Professor Tadeusz Smolinski, the guy who wrote the clinical study, the guy who did the research that connected the major impact of vitamin D's impact on cardiovascular health about 3.5, 4 years ago from the University of Ohio. When he wrote about vitamin D's impact, and when I read his article, we were in the stage of improving and trying to improve our nitric oxide supplement. I actually reached out to him and said, I have a theory that my nitric oxide supplement with the vitamin D would be fit right into what you found with the vitamin D research. And little did I know that 2 days later, his PhD assistant would call me on the phone and say, the professor wants to talk to you, because if you have what you say you do in this nitric oxide extension, he wants to know about it and he'd like to test it. So I flew back to Ohio. We ended up making a large donation for a company our size, because I wanted to prove through their nonprofit funding of their lab, so there would be no conflict of interest, to be able to prove whether or not our nitric oxide extension was what I thought it was, and the vitamin D ultimately. And we ended up publishing a paper 2 years ago, right at the time that the world melted down 2 years ago in February. It was published internationally, and in his study, he proved at the cellular endothelial level in his lab that a cell surrounded by our supplement, Cardio Miracle, extended and stimulated nitric oxide for over 24 hours. And he was shocked, because most amino acids, arginine, carnitine, ornithine, citrulline, beets, the nitrates, the beets, the beets and the kale and spinach, extend nitric oxide for 2 to 3 hours, and that's it. So if you want to have around-the-clock nitric oxide stimulation, you essentially need to be eating beets every 2 hours or 3 hours, all night and all day long. Well, that can get a little bit difficult, and plus a little scary every time you go to the bathroom, perhaps. But the reality is, so when he proved in his lab, and he called me up and he said, you know, you seem like a nice guy, but I don't know that you're really smart enough to figure out what you actually figured out. He said, I have never seen this kind of nitric oxide. He says, what did you get your PhD? And I said, only in life and making other mistakes, probably. And I said, but he said, this is amazing. He said, and not only did you extend nitric oxide immediately, and it lasted at a therapeutic level for over 24 hours, he said, something you probably know nothing about, the free radical peroxynitrite, which is one of the most common problems that happens when you stimulate nitric oxide through, you know, Viagra, arginine, and those types of things without buffering it properly. He said, your solution reduces the free radical in addition to lasting for 24 hours. He says, this is the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. So, and he said, how did you do this? And I said, well, maybe it's a gift from God. It was just I just connected the dots of 7 years of research around the clock, talking to people who were a lot smarter than myself, reading all I could, and then trying to connect the dots really without a basis in nutritional science or chemistry. But I knew that there was a lot of studies coming out, and I would try to read those. But that aside, so that's why we're so excited to have people like yourself who understand how important nitric oxide is, understand how critical vitamin D is, especially right now. I want people to know there is nothing more important than the nitric oxide level and the safe vitamin D level to help build and support your immune system in these very perilous times. And the number one enemy of vitamin D and nitric oxide in your body is stress and fear. And so people who are stressed out, fearful, you're lowering your nitric oxide, you're depleting your vitamin D, you're making yourself more susceptible to having a problem with what's going on here, where you need to elevate that nitric oxide, elevate that vitamin D. And one of the other things that was, and I know this is a long answer, but Professor Malinsky, I said to him, I really believe that less vitamin D combined with 24/7 nitric oxide will be 80% absorbable. And he said, in his Polish accent, I think you may be right. And we just engaged one of the top former pharmacologists, pharmaceutical scientists in the world. And I shared this theory with him, and I said, I want you to test out against all the literature, 5 million articles, clinical studies. I want to know if this delivery of nitric oxide will enhance the bioavailability of the vitamin D3. And he goes, well, so he gave me this long answer. He's a PhD, he thinks that I'm, just fell off the turnip truck. And right. So in the process, last week I got an email and he said, John, I think you're right. He said, the vitamin D3, the vitamin D3 bioavailability is proving out against all the literature. He says, I think you're right, and I was wrong. And I was like, go figure. So, that's why Janet loves me, is that I'm occasionally right, not very often, every once in a while. But, I think, Dr. Northrup, one of the great things that Janet and I met 8 years ago, actually on Halloween night was our first date, and she was, and I shouldn't have, it's the old thing, don't be two-faced and wear the costume you're wearing now, but the reality is she was very low in vitamin D, and maybe she could just briefly share her vitamin D story, because I think it should give hope to a lot of your listeners.
Yeah, I was at 32 after supplementing for years at 10,000 international units.
32 at a blood level.
That was it. And
wow.
I suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depression. I was always sick. With the chronic fatigue, I would have relapses at least twice a year where I'd be flat in bed, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe up for an hour a day. So you add that along with the depression, I really suffered. And
Let me just add, she raised a child that was handicapped, who had had the cord wrapped around at birth, until a teenager, and then had to, against all, maternal desires, had to finally put him in a group home because he
Oh,
was
yeah.
too big
Yeah.
to handle, and then he ultimately died, an iatrogenic death at the hands of the hospital with some mistreatment, and died at 31. So she had a lot of reasons to be depressed and to be dependent on prescription drugs and things for that period of time.
But
Right.
I had depression from the time I was 13, so it was really, I know that road. And since I've been on Cardio Miracle, my vitamin D went up to an 84.8 within months.
Wow.
And the depression, gone. The fibromyalgia, gone. The chronic fatigue, gone. I've not had one relapse in 8 years, which for me, to be healthier now at 65 than I was in my 40s, is miraculous. It really, really is. So vitamin D is a huge, huge deal.
But the thing that's so interesting to me is, generally speaking, the Hollick protocol, Michael Hollick at Boston University, world-renowned vitamin D researcher, he will, to get people up to an optimal level, he will use 50,000 international units.
Wow.
Yeah, to push it into the cells. The dose in Cardio Miracle is much lower than that, but there's something about the synergistic effect of all the different nutrients that makes a huge impact. And I think that this is also, it's a paradigm shift that we have, where even in supplements, like a lot of functional medicine, you go into a functional medicine doctor and you're being given a slew of supplements. The thinking is no different from pharmaceutical medicine, but they're supplements. It's interesting to me that Cardio Miracle generally will replace an entire cabinet full of, oh, well, I need the B1 and I need to have my D2 and my K2 and I need all of, it's all synergistically in one powder that tastes good. And that's kind of miraculous in and of itself, I think.
Well, it's been kind of fun because, in our little packets, for example, we can just put it into a glass of water and stir it up. And like you say, we've had so many people who say to us, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of taking handfuls and handfuls of supplements and having a whole cupboard full that all eventually expire most of the time because I forget to take them all. And so, a lot of people have said, oh, to be able to do this twice a day,
Yeah.
drink it and drink it. And the reality is that people have other, some things they probably need a little more of if they're coming down or concerned about catching a little bit of the issues from the variants or whatever. Obviously boosting the zinc a little bit, boosting the magnesium, the vitamin C, et cetera. But we basically find that whenever we are feeling like we're exposed or we're out and about, we just take 4 servings of this.
That's a great idea. And also, I just want to compliment you on those little packets, because I've been on planes a lot this past year. And I always take those little single serving packets. You don't need to worry about getting the liquid through TSA, and then you've got your packet. It's easy to put in your bottle of water. And, it's just very convenient. It's a real service to humanity, I have to say, and if you're traveling around, and right now, on airplanes, you're really close with a lot of other people. You don't know what the quality of air is. But then if you're driving for 8 to 9 hours, sitting in one position, that's not so great. So we always need things that are going to enhance the circulation of the blood, because there's a lot of stuff going on now that favors blood clotting. It favors increased viscosity and the rouleau foundation or formation of those red blood cells sticking to each other. And when you have enough nitric oxide, that doesn't happen. Now, there's other things, obviously, that are helpful: standing barefoot on the ground, walking on the beach barefoot, sun gazing, if you just do a little of it, like at sunrise or sunset, those are very helpful things. Meditating. I haven't done this yet. The plunging in cold water, the Wim Hof stuff. I know that it's helpful. I just can't, I
That's
cannot
good, yeah.
myself. Have you done it?
I've done it. Actually, I used to. I heard that Tony Robbins used to jump in a 57-degree pool every morning. So, and we live in at 7,000 feet in the mountains outside of Park City, Utah, and we have the Provo River runs through our family property. And so in the summer we have a dam that gets the river to about 4 or 5 feet. We have a swimming hole. And a year ago, I set an objective that every morning I'd go down before 9 a.m. when the temperature was under 60, and I'd jump in the river. And, it was amazing because you think you would die from pneumonia the next day, but there really is something about shocking your lymphatic system at those cold plunge temperatures. I have to admit, I didn't do it much this last year. I'd rather sit in a warm hot tub and look at the morning sun than jump in the river.
And I'd rather think about him doing that than doing that.
So, but I think there's so many wonderful things. But, really, Dr. Northrup, and really on behalf of a grateful group of people, thank you for your leadership, your courage in talking about strengthening the immune system, for heaven's sake. Why haven't we heard this from the leaders, from the doctors, from the scientists? Why is it that the people are being censored who are basically saying, let your God-given immune system protect you in this environment that we live in? It makes no sense at all. But we believe that nitric oxide was a gift to be discovered in the 80s, given the Nobel Prize in the 90s, and it was called the spark of life by the University of Florida. It was, it's called the miracle molecule by Science Magazine. Well, there's 200,000 almost articles now in clinical studies that it's important to everything, but it's most important to keeping the vascular system healthy, which has 70,000 miles of endothelial cells everywhere. And so one of the key parts is fighting inflammation, and that's one of the reasons we put in turmeric and astaxanthin and grapeseed extract and 24 plant-based but pharmaceutical-grade ingredients. We try to use the best of the best, tested at the highest levels, and we've just been so fortunate that we hear hundreds and hundreds of testimonials constantly.
Day after day.
Of which, we've been silenced. We can't even really talk about them. But
I know
rest assured, my best testimonial is to say, well, if Ty Bollinger and Christiane Northrup and Robert Scott Bell and Dr. Brad Nelson and G. Edward Griffin and Ed Group all take this every day, don't believe this chubby guy from Utah who should have died 15 years ago from cardiovascular disease. Believe them. They're the experts.
Yeah, I think also my colleague, Dr. Lee Merritt, was just down at the Red Pill Expo, and Lee swears by the stuff. I adore her. She's a orthopedic spine surgeon with the Navy, and that woman knows a lot. And, so she was telling me.
She came and picked up her packets at the Red Pill, and 2 weeks ago, I had the just delightful opportunity to sit next to Judy Mikovits, and Judy is now, and her sister, her twin sister, are both delighted to become Cardio Miracle users as well. So we're just having so many wonderful things happening. But our goal is to help keep the freedom fighters alive, ourselves and all of those that we love and appreciate so much. We got to keep them going. And Ed Griffin, who had his 90th birthday, and I'm telling you, I met him 12 years ago. He looks better today on his Cardio Miracle than he did 12 years ago. and he's 90 and going strong. And he'll tell you he went off his medications, his periodontal visits, his hygienist said, "Mr. Griffin, what are you doing? I haven't seen you in 5 years, and your periodontal, your pockets and your bleeding are better than they've ever been." He goes, "I don't know." And he was talking to me, and I said, "It's nitric oxide, Ed. That helps the gums. It helps fight the bacteria." So we're just having really a wonderful experience, and we've had so many of the Northrup subscribers. We'll call them up. I'll occasionally call them myself and my team, and they'll all say, "Hey, if Dr. Northrup says it's good for me, it's good for me. And man alive, has it made a difference in my life." I'm so grateful to her for recommending. So that's been just wonderful. We appreciate so much you sharing this life-changing opportunity with people.
Well, I don't want anyone. Okay, so you talked about, what we call aging, and I like Dr. Mario Martinez' quote, which is, "Getting older is inevitable. Aging is optional." And so Lee Merritt, I've got to show you this picture. I don't know if you can see it. So this is Lee and G. Edward Griffin just over this past, and she just sent me this picture. And she said,
That was last night.
Yeah, we were
last
there.
night,
We were at Ed's
You were there.
table with him watching it.
Yep. She said, "Me and G. Edward Griffin at his 90th birthday party. The party continued at the hotel till after midnight. I finally said to Mr. Griffin, 'I'm not 90 anymore and I have to go to bed.'"
And she had a pair of tennis shoes on that were fluorescent orange with her outfit. She is a kick. We had a blast. It was really fun to talk to her.
Yeah, so here's the thing.
Really,
Because the group, all right, in the age group, I would say over 50, we're the group that did not come of age with social media. So we did not learn to socialize sitting at a restaurant table with our cell phone and communicating via satellite to the person sitting across the table. So I believe that keeping ourselves healthy is absolutely essential, because we have tribal memory that humanity needs. Like, we actually know how to have a social function without a device. Some of us know how to do partner dancing. Some of us know how to have a conversation or to actually read a book. And we forget the pleasure of sitting outside under a tree reading a book. Now, if you have failing eyesight, the beginning of macular degeneration, cataracts, the stuff that a good antioxidant could prevent, then all of that wisdom that is stored up in this physical body gets lost when somebody begins to believe the narrative that after 50, it's all downhill, or by the age of 50, that's when you need to start with all of the screening. It's like, then you need your colonoscopy. And if you haven't had them yet, you need your mammogram, and you need your PSA test if you're a guy, and you need your lipid profile and all the rest of it. And if people just understood that the only reason that cancer increases after the age of 50, the only reason that all of that happens is because your body has been giving you warning signs all along. Like for women, it's PMS. I mean, PMS is telling you, hey, you've got another cycle now to clean this up. And then if you don't, then at perimenopause, it's PMS on steroids. And then if you've had seasonal affective disorder, which is the PMS of the annual calendar, then that's another wake-up call. The female body does that. And so we have all these opportunities. And if people just understood, there were some things they can do. One, stop watching things that scare you or depress you. You just don't do it. I'm so allergic to that I can watch a Netflix movie, and if they start with the pookie music and the whole thing, I just put my hand up. I'm not going to watch that scene, or I fast forward. I just can't do it. But then when it's better, then I will watch. I do not watch any mainstream news, and I haven't for decades. And the reason is, I've been on the news. I've been on the Tonight Show and the Today Show and the NBC Nightly News and Oprah and PBS, and I've been on all of them. And I know how they're done. I know how things are edited. I know that they take the worst news they can find from all over the world and then put it to background music that gets it in to the cell. It's kind of like polysorbate 80 getting stuff across the blood-brain barrier. And the truth of the matter is 90% of what's going on in the world right now is absolutely positive. It's absolutely, the trees are growing and the water is flowing and, and things are working. People love each other. They find each other. They have babies. So we focus on what is working, but at the same time, our head is not in the sand. We know that there are toxic chemicals in the water, in the air, in the food, and we need ways at this particular time. I don't think we'll need it forever, but for right now, we need tools, we need ways to protect ourselves from all of the toxins. And those toxins might be depression and negative emotions and so on. And just a supplement like Cardio Miracle twice a day, hey, even once a day, can make a significant difference. And I have recommended it to so many people, and they notice a difference. At first, this is interesting because when I first started to take it, I got that niacin flush, and I don't get that anymore. But I always liked getting it. It never bothered me, where you think, what is this? I'm all like hot and all, but that's vasodilatation. Are you finding that people are still talking about that when they start?
Yeah, sometimes. I think it's probably a little bit of the detoxing of the microcapillaries in some people. But, funny story, when Janet and I first met, and I went to meet her parents in Southern California, I had my first new formulation of the new Cardio Miracle product, because I had just left a big giant nitric oxide company and had tried to help them move towards saving the world, and they want to just make money. And I said, I want to save the world, and I want the best product, not just a great product. And so I formulated this product, and we went to her parents' house.
They're wondering who he is.
And they're wondering who I was anyway, who had swept their daughter off his feet on Halloween night. And so we go down to meet her parents, and they're asking me what they said, well, you're making a supplement? I thought you were a multi-millionaire life insurance and financial planner. And I said, well, this is more important. I'm trying to save people's lives. And they go, and her dad, who at the time was 87 or 88 years old. He was a practicing dentist. He does 50 push-ups 3 times a day. He's like Jack LaLanne with with a dental drill in his hand. And so he sees me, and he looks at his poor daughter, and he says, well, I'd like to try that. So I mix up a glass of my first batch of Cardio Miracle, and he takes it. Well, it tastes pretty good. And all of a sudden, he starts sweating profusely. And her mother comes over. And I had never seen anybody have the niacin flush like that. And he was just dripping with sweat. And Janet's looking at me like, you're killing my father. and finally, and really, I think her mother thought that he was having a stroke. And so I explained the niacin flush, and he kind of finished, and he's kind of like a cross between Don Knotts and Mr. Magoo. But he kind of looked at me and said, wow, that's really powerful stuff. So that was my introduction to her family. Well, fast forward 8 years later.
Blood pressure.
And then we're talking, and he says, well, you help yourself to too many portions at dinners. I mean, he weighs 140 pounds. I can put him in my rear pocket most of the time. But he said, I said, well, this really helps with blood pressure. He goes, really? And I said, yeah. I said, I probably have better blood pressure than you do. He said, over my dead body. He says, there's no way. So he runs back into the bedroom and brings out his blood pressure cuff. And so he's taking my blood pressure. and he finishes my blood pressure, and he goes, oh, that can't be right, and takes it and puts it on the other arm, and does it again, and it ended up that my blood pressure was 116/74, and his was 126/80, and he was shocked. And he said, how could you possibly have better blood pressure than me? And I said, it's this stuff, that stuff that just about killed you a minute ago, is gonna help you with your blood pressure. So that's just
great.
one of the funny little stories from Janet's family that we
That
have.
is great. Now, do you have this slide? This is the one that shows the capillaries in the blood vessels, how many
I'm sure
capillaries.
they can pull that one up. Pull
Let's
that
pull
up. That's
the endothelium. I just want people to really get a feeling about it. Yeah, yeah. So this is the endothelium. So you know, when I say to you, this is going to increase blood flow and that the nitric oxide is produced all over the body, most people, most doctors don't realize what that is. So if we read this, the endothelium is the single cell inner lining of the entire cardiovascular system in the human body, 100,000 miles. It's the largest organ in the endocrine system. Every time you have a feeling or an emotion, that endothelium actually reacts. The surface area of the entire endothelium is over 400 square meters, 6 tennis courts. The microvasculature is the primary conduit through which the human body transmits oxygen, nutrients, and other biological information to its peripheral tissues. So you see, that's tiny little capillaries. That is just a fingertip. So the blood goes all over. So anything that affects an organ system this large is affecting your eyes, your pancreas, your liver. It's every part of your body. You know how in Western medicine, we've got it all split up, right? So the nephrologists take care of your kidneys and the cardiologists take care of your heart and the neurologists take care of the brain, which is, when you think about it, ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We need something that takes care of everything. And it used to be, you know, that the GP, the family doc, did that. At least some acupuncturists and herbalists and so on do that kind of thing. But we need medicine supplements that take into account the whole body. And the other thing that's great, you hear a lot of this, I have through the years, well, I can't take pills. I choke on pills. I just can't take them, you know. And so having it in a powdered form, and it, by the way, it's a very fine powder because I keep the big jar of it. And then when I take the scoop and put it in water, I have to back away because the stuff is so powdery.
No.
It is so fine that you get it in your lungs, you know, and you're kind of like coughing.
I know. We're working on that, but that's the silica, which actually Mike Adams recommended that we should put in it. But you know, it's interesting. But the liquid, the powder to a liquid, is really important because the water activates all of the key ingredients, as opposed to if it was already in a liquid in a bottle, it would have to be pasteurized, which would destroy a lot of the wonderful organic fruits, vegetables, and other ingredients that we have. And if it's in a capsule, it ends up going down and messing around with the stomach acid over a period of time, versus taking the liquid, kind of flows right through and gets absorbed in the colon and also in the mouth. The beets and the nitrates are very helpful in helping to stimulate the dual pathway nitric oxide that makes this product so unique.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, it's just it's a great thing for people. And isn't it a shame? I mean, it really is a shame. If this were a drug, right, we would be able to make claims all over the place. But the way it's been set up, we can't say anything. I would love to tell you all the things that that people recover from, or things that improve, or that kind of thing. But what we can say is, because this is increasing nitric oxide in your body for 24 hours, then all of the things that huge organ system known as the microvasculature, it's improving everything it touches. And that's basically everything. That's your skin, it's your kidneys, it's your breast tissue, it's everything. And, so
It's
that's
your
it
brain.
in your
And,
brain.
the thing that we all, as we get older, and even though you don't want to recognize our years, the last thing we want is to have atherosclerosis in the microvasculature of our brain, and have the lymphatic systems dry out from lack of oxygen and fluid in the brain, because that's what leads to the decline that most of us would just as soon, put a bag over our head than to have to experience. And so blood flow in the microcapillaries, improving and fighting inflammation in the microcapillaries and in those minuscule little lymphatic vessels is critical. We spend so much time worried about the coronary arteries and, the $250,000 surgeries to clean out the plaque in those coronary arteries,
Oh.
when it's the microcapillaries that are essentially the key to the entire irrigation system of the body.
Yeah, and if you look at the number of people, I was just with a gentleman's family down in Long Island, and he has, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 stents. And once you've got one of those stents, you can't get it out. It's in there, and that's not the same. It will never be the same as your own body's blood vessel. It acts differently, and they get hardened. And
They get blocked up. And the other thing is, when they insert it, they are literally damaging the 1 cell thick endothelial lining, which compromises within a period of time its ability to express the nitric oxide. And so that's a big deal. But one of the other things that I think is really important that I think you would find fascinating, having been in as an obstetrician, is the fact that the blood viscosity is heavily regulated and important and modulated by nitric oxide. And what they're now finding, is that people, and this is really, really important, Case Western again, Professor Stamler, who's done some really good research, he determined that blood that had left the body through a transfusion, or a donor for a transfusion, a blood donor, and then put into the body after, a couple of hours, had lost all of its nitric oxide.
sure.
And so when you get a transfused blood, you now are putting blood in your system with your good blood, essentially dead blood. It's valuable because it's replacing obviously what you lost. But they haven't even connected these dots yet, which is crazy. They should be upping your nitric oxide supplementation, arginine, citrulline, to uptake your body's ability to nitric oxide and to help oxygenate that blood with life-changing nitric oxide, because they find that there's a percentage of cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, etc., after a transfusion. So it's really interesting. But one thing that was interesting, I went back to New York a few months ago, and I wanted to come to Maine, but I would have had to swim there. They wouldn't let me in the county, but which means you're dying to see you again. But I went back and I did some testing with some thermography and some other testing that test your interstitial fluid, including your blood viscosity. And you'll find this is part of my life's kind of this comedy occurring, because people look at me and they say, well, you don't look like Jack LaLanne, why should we believe you? And I said, well, I should be dead. Should be dead, so that's why you should believe me. But I looked at this gal after she tested on she tested my fluids, and I was doing some interesting testing on a few things I was interested in. And she came back to me and she said, how old are you? And I told her, I can't say it in front of you, but I'm older. And she says, how long have you been overweight or whatever? I said, longer than you'd want to hear about. And she says, well, then tell me, why do you have the best blood viscosity I have tested in 17 years as a professor?
Wow.
And I said, well, I said, my father died at 62, my uncle at 57, my grandfather at 66, my cousin of 49, all of heart disease. And I said, and I have the best blood viscosity you've ever tested. And I said, I think it's this stuff. And she said, it's unbelievable. So the key, as you know, from cardiac events, cardiovascular events, is if you have a sticky, irritated, inflamed lining of your artery, that's when LDL cholesterol, that's when the bad stuff, you have a fissure and the body comes in and builds a little patch, like patching a freeway full of potholes. So you got all these patches, and then the arteries narrow down because they're not dilating, because they're not smooth, they're not getting the blood flow that they need to stay at a good level. And then all of a sudden you have atherosclerosis, collapsing that, causing a stroke, throwing some of the plaque, and then it becomes a stroke, or it closes down, and then all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, you have some chest pain? What a terrible thing. We'd better throw a stent in. So you're 50, 60% occluded. Some places, I heard somebody the other day, and they said, I said, how much blockage do you have? So, well, one told me 40%, another said almost 50%, another one said substantial. And the next thing I knew, I had a stent. And I said, there's times where you need a second opinion, because the stent is relieving the pain, the angina, but it's not fixing the systemic problem, which is a sticky artery. So there are people who may have higher cholesterol and everything else, but if they have smooth arteries because they're elevating their nitric oxide, and they have nitric oxide rich blood that's the perfect viscosity, there's nothing to stick to. And so people don't understand it's the systemic issue of that inflammation, and that's one of the reasons we're the only one I know of in the nitric oxide world that has astaxanthin, and we have turmeric, and we have all these anti-inflammatories and antioxidants to help make sure that we help keep those arterial walls as smooth as possible with the expression of the nitric oxide.
Right. And then, so here's what we don't want people to wait until there's a problem. And I think that this is one of the things, I don't want to sell anything here except prevention. And prevention, as you know, is a very difficult sell, because people don't, it's like, you can decrease the risk of breast cancer by 70% by exercise. Well, you don't hear that. You only hear run for the cure. Okay, you got it. Now we're running. It would be, so this is just one of the things that I do, my daughter does every day. Almost nothing is ever wrong with us. And to me, this is just something I'm going to do every day. But I also know when somebody reaches out to me and they have a significant problem, then I say, just try this. And generally speaking, do you notice that people get a result pretty quickly? That's what I've seen, again, because nitric oxide opens up everything so quickly. And if it is, again, the Uber neurotransmitter, like with Janet, like having depression, low serotonin, low dopamine, can't get out of bed, boom, when that's elevated, this can be a very quick thing. So what I would say to people is just give it a try. I mean, it's like you got nothing to lose. Yeah.
Absolutely. And based upon that question, which we actually have a few questions, and I'm trying to juggle this without looking in the wrong place with the camera. But first of all, it's so fun to go to these 3-day conventions like the Truth About Cancer and have Ty and Charlene Bollinger stand up and endorse Cardio Miracle. And then Robert Scott Bell in his talk talks about Cardio Miracle. And then we have Billy DeMoss standing up and talking about now he thinks he's going to be the young stud surfer of California because of the erectile benefits of Cardio Miracle from the stage. And I'm going, Billy, please calm down. We don't want to be in all the porn magazines about this. This is the natural solution. But it's so interesting. But every place we go, when people end up either with a sample or if they buy a package and then we give them a sample pack, the next day we have at least 3 to 5 people come up and say, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what is in this stuff? I had a naturopath from Dallas, 43 years old. She came up to me the next day. She said, I don't know what to say. She said, I slept through the night without waking up to go to the bathroom for the first time in 20 years last night after taking your product. And then I had another one who came in and said, you know, my shoulder has been, I can't get my arm higher than this. It says, and look at what's happened. So, you know, again, we're not trying to talk about a bunch of medical claims, but I can tell you that if you do your research and you're the expert on this, and I basically say, hey, don't believe me, just listen to Dr. Northrup. She's the expert. But the reality is, if you look up online any chronic illness, anyone, and then put in nitric oxide with it, or lack of nitric oxide, or lack of vitamin D3, without exception, you will find that almost every chronic condition comes back to not enough nitric oxide and not enough vitamin D3. Now, we got a couple of quick questions. One, how does this affect digestive issues? Well, again, we can't make medical claims, but we have people with irritable bowel, acid reflux, and Crohn's that think that I'm the greatest guy in the world. That's all I can say.
My cousin, another,
Like her cousin,
or my nephew, another family member.
was suffering so badly from
Yeah.
the issues of Crohn's
Right.
that he couldn't even hardly practice more than a few hours a day, a couple days a week.
Practices dentistry.
And and it was a result actually of chemotherapy, having cancer a few
Yeah.
years before. And he is very, very grateful. Somebody asked, how does this deal with blood pressure? Well, the Nobel Prize was awarded for nitric oxide's impact on blood pressure, blood chemistry, cardiovascular disease. So blood pressure in most instances is very receptive to elevated nitric oxide because it dilates, that you said in your first comment of the evening, it dilates the artery, so it helps do that. But more importantly, it helps heal the artery that could have been stretched out by having too much pressure over the years because it was contracting and getting that higher reading of pressure. As that rebuilds itself over 30 to 60 days, remarkable things have happened. Other people say, how long does this take to work, this product? Well, it probably responds to how long it took you to get this sick
Yes.
or to have these many problems. I said, because everybody's chemistry is different. But as you've so beautifully put, the prevention side, you know, everyone is 50% of the world is pre-diabetic or diabetic already, and most are going to get there anyway. And the other thing that I wanted to say, so prevention's everything, and I guess the question is, when's the best time to try to prepare to prevent having Alzheimer's or dementia? Would it be after it starts? After it starts? Or, you know, if so, go visit an old folks dementia home for a few hours and then decide if it's worth a couple of dollars a day to prevent that as long as possible.
That's right.
We do notice though, people that are really ill or people that are really tuned into their bodies, they notice it pretty quickly.
And people who are really fit.
Yeah.
Because we haven't even talked about the athletic performance, the aerobics. We have I had Billy DeMoss, you know, Mr. Chiropractor, psycho surfer. He said he's already surfing circles around young men. He's taking Cardio Miracle now. And he says, oh my gosh, he says, I feel like I can stay in the water all day. So the endurance, the stamina, the soreness the next day, because when you build and help the lymphatic contraction, you're also improving, getting rid of the ammonia before it becomes the lactic acid. So we have athletic people, and even somebody gardening or somebody doing work around the house. You can be exhausted, feel like you've been run over by a truck. The next morning, no soreness.
Right.
It's not a medical claim, but it happens all the time to us. I mean, we've been going like a bat out of hell for the last 3 weeks. And, you know, so we just pound down another serving or two of this every few hours, and we're ready to roll. So it's really pretty remarkable.
That's great. Well, I think we've come to about an hour. That's what most people can deal with. Is there anything?
One last question. Somebody said, how about blood thinners? Well, as you, having been, you know, a physician, you know how blood thinners aren't very good for people.
No,
But they're obviously standard protocol for, a lot of times, but this is what I would say, and I'm not a doctor, so this isn't medical advice, but when people often are on blood thinners, I would seriously quiz my doctor why I'm on it and how long they are anticipating I should be on it. For most people and most doctors, unfortunately, you fall through the cracks and it becomes a lifetime regimen or sentence.
yes.
I don't think that's good medicine, and I would defer to Dr. Northrup to validate that. But if in fact you just have had a cardiac event, you have 3 stents, you have blockages in your carotid arteries, and you're potentially at risk of having an immediate massive stroke or heart attack, then of course perhaps a blood thinner might make some sense. What we would recommend is that people take the label of our product to their physician and not ask them if they should take it, but ask them if there's anything in these ingredients that can hurt them or is a problem for them to take. Most of the time they know nothing about it.
That's
So
right,
in
that's
most
right.
most cases would probably recommend you get a different doctor to help manage your care. But the reality is, if this guy, John Hewlett, has the best blood viscosity that a person who tests that every day for 17 years as a college professor who teaches blood work and blood viscosity, then I would suspect having good blood viscosity is a lot like putting a high quality synthetic oil in your car versus having watered down oil in your car. Your brain needs cholesterol. Your brain needs normal oxygenated blood. It doesn't need poison filtered thin blood, other than in rare exceptions under the supervision of a competent integrated physician. So my advice would be, it's your life. Do the research, do your homework. They call it practicing medicine for a reason. They are practicing. And the question is, I believe, and I know you believe, because you're a freedom fighter, Dr. Northrup, in that we have the choice over our body. We have the choice over what we allow to be injected. We have a choice over how we can be treated. And we have the choice to ask for an additional second or third or fourth opinion, or not be treated at all. Because we know that the statistics are 1 in 4 people who go in the hospital aren't going to come out. And there's so many problems when I heard it again this weekend, and I heard it the week before, the leading cause, everyone knows says the leading cause of death is cardiovascular disease. The leading cause is medical error and wrong protocols and even properly prescribed prescriptions. If you add all of those together, you're probably going to get the leading cause of death. So for a person to remain uninformed and not find those opportunities to improve their own their health, that would be important. But let me just ask, Jen's such a doll, and she listens to me all the time. But is there anything you'd like to say to all these wonderful people listening today?
Oh my gosh, I mean, just try it, I've heard too many stories. I've seen too many people benefit, and there is an answer, and I think it's really interesting that this would come about now, especially in light of what's happening with the medical community and how that's affecting our health. Just try it, it's there.
Money back guarantee.
Yeah, it's like
we have a wonderful offer for everyone who's on this webinar tonight. You've got everything to gain in the world, and of course, Dr. Northrup, we love and appreciate you so much for your taking the time to first meet us several years ago and then do your due diligence with the product, both personally and with your loved ones, friends, family, and people that you've advised. And we're just so grateful for that. And we join you in this effort to try to help fight for our liberties and our health choices in these most difficult times. And we do everything possible to try to help all of these customers have the best possible experience. If they go on our subscription program, they can save 20-30% on a regular basis. We are doing everything to fight increasing shipping costs and supply line chain. We're staying up nights trying to figure all of this out because these customers are our family and people that we care about. And we know how you feel about your followers, Dr. Northrup. So we feel a very strong responsibility to live up to the trust that you've given us as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a pleasure. Hopefully we've helped a few people tonight.
That's the goal,
Yeah.
and it's always good to laugh, so I'm glad you laugh at my jokes. Janet and you are probably the only two people who laugh at my jokes, so I appreciate so much. You have such a cheery disposition. We love you and appreciate so much good that you're doing, and pray that God will continue to bless you in all the good that you're doing.
Thank you so much. All right, good. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.